Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Deborah Niblick. I am the senior librarian over here at the Monterey Park Library, and I'm really excited to present along with the Chinatown Service Center Behavioral Health Services this panel on API mental health. Just a couple of housekeeping tips. If you need to step away, don't worry. This is going to be recorded, so we will post this on our YouTube channel right after this presentation. And if you have any questions, go ahead and just save them to the end of the presentation so we can have this, we can really kind of dig into the issues regarding API mental health. So I wanted to introduce to you today's panelists. We have Nina Loc from Chinatown Service Center. She is the director of Chinatown Service Center Behavioral Services Department. She has been working there for more than 6 years as the Director of Behavioral Health Services since 2016. And in this role, Ms. Loc supervises the management, planning, and the development of counseling and mental health programs and services consistent with the vision of the mission of CSC. And as the director, she assures the very smooth day-to-day operations of programs and services and adheres to CSC policies and procedures. Ms. Loc maintains an active role in mental health related activities and advocates for underserved and vulnerable populations, including Asian and immigrant populations throughout the San Gabriel region. Thank you for joining us today, Nina. We also have Emily Wu Truong. Emily Wu Truong is an award-winning mental health advocate who began her grassroots activism to alleviate the stigma of mental illness in 2013. And after being diagnosed, she began sharing her recovery, and her story has actually been featured by Each Mind Matters, Good Morning America, and NBC Asian America. And she was actually honored by Senator Ed Hernandez with the 2015 Woman of Achievement Award. And in 2017, Los Angeles County Supervisors honored Emily's request to establish May 10th as Asian Pacific American Mental Health Day. And Assembly member Ed Chow honored Emily with the 2018 Make a Difference Award. And as NAMI San Gabriel Valley's Peer Programs Coordinator, Emily facilitates weekly support groups to provide support and let her peers know that they are not alone in their struggles. And we also have Sergeant Bob Hung. Sergeant Bob Hung joined the Monterey Park Police Department in 2009 and began his career as a patrol officer. And in 2013, he joined the Investigation Bureau and worked as a detective specializing in fraud and later gang investigations. In 2016, Sergeant Hung was promoted to the rank of sergeant and was later assigned to the Community Engagement Bureau. And as the Community Engagement Bureau supervisor, he supervises the mental health evaluation team and neighborhood engagement team. These specialized teams and officers focus on long-term solutions by collaborating and utilizing private-public partnerships to solve complex problems in the community, like homelessness and crisis incidents. Sergeant Hung has a very deep connection with the mentally ill population because he has a sibling who suffers from a severe mental illness and finds meaning in educating the public on mental health. And also we have Monica Cua. She's actually going to be presenting right after this panel on some of the amazing services that Chinatown Service Center Behavioral Services Department offers if you are interested in learning more about that. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. So the purpose of this particular panel is to share how mental health disorders affect not only the life of the person experiencing the disorder, but also the family and even the community at large. And what this panel will try to do is talk about the stigma and how that can prevent people from receiving medical assistance, as mental illness is seen as often taboo and sometimes not an actual legitimate health problem that can be solved through means in lieu of medical care, specifically in the Asian American community. And I also the other goal of this panel was to see how we can bridge these conversations with our older generation, the greatest generation, and just to ensure that they realize that this is something that can be managed. So we'll go ahead and kick off this conversation. I'm going to start with Emily. Hopefully you're ready. Yes. Do you mind talking a little bit about your mental health journey, and how would you describe it to someone who may be experiencing the same thing you are?
Okay, well, a little background about myself is that I was born in El Dorado, Arkansas, um, and so when I moved, my family decided to move from Arkansas to California. It was a hard move for me. Like, if anyone's watched the Disney movie Inside Out, like that was my experience. Like, because the differences were so great, like I felt like I was at home in Arkansas, even though our family was like one of three Asians in our town, three Asian families in our town. I didn't feel like I was any different from the other black and white kids. And then when we moved from there to here in the San Gabriel Valley, I just saw all these Asian kids, and then I I experienced bullying, and um it was really hard because I felt at home in Arkansas, and then I basically kind of felt homesick for Arkansas, and I didn't know how to process it all. Um as a kid, like, who was just starting second grade and over here, and then but because all the kids are Asian, there's also the model minority myth gets introduced to you indirectly, because then all the Asian parents start, measuring all their kids. It didn't help that my one of my classmates, who had the same last name as me, Wu, was the smartest kid in our class. My mom was like, "Why aren't you friends with him?" Like, oh gosh, like, so, having to be measured up to other people. I have a older brother, older sister, but my brother is like the prize child because he got the straight A's and everything, and then or my sister, she got straight A's until high school, and then for me, like, I never really had straight A's, and so I just, because of this comparison, I never felt like I was a person of worth, a person who could be, um, like, you know, like, like, because you're not in that spotlight, it's like you're only loved if you have those great grades and could be seen as a star child. So, like, even so, anyway, so it took me many, many years for me to finally be diagnosed with depression and anxiety. Um, Post college, I, for so long, had it took me so long to finally realize that for most of my life, my depression, my mental illness was largely due to my my feeling like I need external validation for validating myself, who I am, my worth, and I was so dependent on it, that I uh, like, that's what crushed me. And so post college, when I finally realized I was having all these breakdowns, due to work issues and people at work not validating me, my work, when I knew I did a good job. Like, I was crushed inside, and what it looked like was just like a lot of sobbing, crying. And I realized that there were some tendencies in myself repeating like a pattern. And so when I finally realized these patterns, like, I knew I needed to get help for myself. And so that's when I realized that I need to find help. I found out about NAMI and wanted, because coming to my family was really hard. Like, they were not even supportive of me, like, writing a biography, because they were like, okay, leave us out of it, you know. But the purposes of that was I wanted other people, my Asian brothers and sisters, who are struggling in silence to know that they are not alone. And so back in 2013, I went to an open public forum event with Congresswoman Judy Chu, Assembly Member Chow, former Assemblyman Mike Eng. And at the end of that seminar about API mental health, they asked like, oh, would anyone like to say a few words? And so at the end of that event, I went up to the podium and I said, I said in a shaky voice, and it was my first time like being vocal about my own mental illness. I said, like I said something to the effect of that I will not stay silent about my mental health issues because there is no shame. There is no shame. There's just, I basically made that declaration to go on a grassroots mission to alleviate the stigma, you know, because it was really strong back in 2013. And even after that, like, I went to my former high school to share like how my mission, but I was also struggling with finding affordable mental health care at the time too. So I went back to my high school, talked to my former psychology teacher, even talked to the assistant principal there at the time. And I was completely misunderstood though. After my visit, they created a post of my face at the school saying this woman is not welcome here. I had found out because my sister, her husband is in law enforcement, and he saw the post at the school. And I was even, when he talked to an employee there, he referred to, someone had referred to me as the crazy lady. So, you know, at first back then when it all first happened, it was like, it hurt so much because, you know, reputation like really means a lot, you know. So like my family was completely involved, and my mom was like, yeah, like, oh my gosh, why are you disclosing? And but as tough as that was to experience and handle the repercussions, I knew because the stigma is so strong, it only meant that I needed to do more. And that's why I, like, back in the day when I didn't see any programs happening, emphasizing on API mental health, that's when I decided I'm going to create programs. And I did so for a time being, but when you're not a nonprofit, like I decided like I'll continue my work through NAMI San Gabriel Valley. So yeah, so a lot has changed from 2013 till now. So yeah.
And I'm really thankful that you realized that, given how difficult it must have been for you, and that's just incredible that you were able to persevere so far. And just again want to thank you so much for sharing your story and being here. But I kind of wanted to kind of piggyback off of what you're experiencing and ask Nina, as a mental health care provider, is Emily's situation, is that something new that you experienced with some of your clientele?
No, it's definitely not. And Emily, thank you for being so brave in sharing your experience and continuing to promote mental health and mental illness in the community. It's nothing new, and we continue to see it in the community. So it is so much more important that we continue to strive forward in educating and providing various workshops and educating the community of what it's like, what are the red flags of depression or anxiety. Um, how do you manage your stress? Do people know how to use different coping skills to manage stress? And not have that correlation with, oh, that's crazy, you're experiencing craziness. Um, it's getting better, 2013, now it's 2021. I think all these effort that many of us have put together, we're seeing some changes, but there's still a high need in continuing to educate the community, especially COVID. It has added more on people. All these symptoms are surfacing up because of the amount of stress everybody is experiencing in life. So, Deborah, thank you for putting this panel together and bringing us back into full circle. I would say, working with Sergeant Hong and Monterey Park Library and Emily, it's like now we're coming in full circle and trying to continue to strive forward.
And my pleasure. I'm just glad that we can have this conversation, because Emily did talk about that she really struggled trying to find mental health care resources. I mean, yes, again, things have evolved quite a bit in the last 10 plus years. What are the current obstacles that you find now, and for folks getting mental health care, other than realizing that I need help or I need to get help from someone else?
Yeah. So one of the biggest one is insurance. Not all insurance cover mental illness right now, and there's some that aren't, and not all agency have all the insurance that they can cover. So insurance is one of the factor, and the other factor, one of the biggest nationwide factors, providers. There's not enough providers in the community right now, and it's due to stigma. There's stigma across the board, and not a lot of people are very interested in this field. So there's not enough provider right now to serve everybody, but it's growing. The number of providers are growing. I'm seeing a lot more students in the field right now. We work with schools, and we're seeing a lot more coming out. So we'll get there.
That's awesome. And I'm going to actually ask this question to Sergeant Hung. As a police officer, as an active member in this community, but also as almost like, because I would love for you to talk a little bit about your story, but also as someone who has a family member experiencing mental illness, like what did that do to you, and how did you figure out she needed help?
Well, I'll kind of give you a little bit of background about myself. I started in law enforcement a little bit later in life. Unlike most police officers who start off around when they're 22, 23, I kind of went through the whole trying to figure out my early 20s, worked corporate jobs, Fortune 500 companies, because, as an Asian American, you're not supposed to become a police officer. You're supposed to become a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, an engineer, and joking aside, something respectable in a very traditional Chinese family. But with that being said, while I was at UC Irvine and my sister was at UC Berkeley, her and I were pretty close, and we started having conversations. And I realized when we would talk, she would say her professor was following her. There was some paranoia, and being so far away, growing up, being pretty close, I kind of believed her, and I would almost like reassure her, like, well, maybe you're just mistaken, or maybe it's just by coincidence you're seeing your professor where you're at the grocery store. But somewhere along the way, you start to realize it was a little bit more serious. My sister took some time off from school, had to move home. And it was around that time, my sister was aware enough herself to start seeking, mental health services herself at Berkeley. And when she came home and told us that she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, I had actually, I think Google was around by then, probably early 2000s. And I looked it up, and it was pretty devastating to know what my sister essentially came home and told us. For my mom, my dad, being very first generation traditional Chinese or from Taiwan, they sought shamans or exorcisms or religious solutions to my sister's mental illness. And it was very difficult for my parents to come to terms with their prized daughter, who went to the highest ranking school compared to her two sons, UC Berkeley, but being diagnosed with something that they felt that, they couldn't control or wanted to control or fix. So, I think a lot of that was what was a very difficult thing for the family to learn to go through. I remember a good family friend of mine was a DCFS MSW, a social worker. And I kind of, this is even before I became a police officer. I kind of relied on her to give me some guidance in what my sister was going through, and what we had to as a family be prepared to navigate and support my sister throughout her life. With that being said, I became a police officer in 2009. At the time, I was 29 years old. And, I think it gave me a little bit different insight about a family member who's sick with mental illness. And then when I became a police officer, now I got to see it from the front lines of dealing from a law enforcement perspective, a first responder perspective in the Asian community, with people who are, in crisis mode. A lot of times having psychiatric breakdown, psychosis states, whether it's bipolar, whether it's depression, or whether it's something as serious as paranoid schizophrenia. So, we are very lucky in the sense my sister, personality-wise, is a very complacent. For the most part, she's willing to take her medication. She's very open to, for a long time, open to therapy. But, a lot of the folks that we deal with in the community from a first responder perspective is not that way. A lot of times they are, self-medicating, sometimes with substance abuse, sometimes with drugs, sometimes with alcohol. Sometimes they're in denial about some of the issues that they have. On top of all that, just like my experience with my family, it's compounded by a misunderstanding from a cultural perspective. A lot of traditional Asian Americans don't view mental illness as mental illness. Rather, they see it as spirits or bad luck, or sometimes they view it as something that the client or the patient is causing or not willing to overcome on their own, as if they can will themselves out of these type of situations. And the reality is understanding it from someone who has a sibling who's severely mentally ill and needs support, and also from a first responder perspective, is challenging at times. There has been situations where my sister has got off her medication, become unstable in a psychotic state, where I worry that if law enforcement went out with her, possibly they may use force on her if she's non-compliant or aggressive. Or, sometimes I would even have to leave work early to rush home, to try to help my parents, because they're up there in age, to deal with her, knowing the fact that I might have to put handcuffs on my sister to try to get her to calm down, or we might have to hospitalize her, to get someone to come and PMRT or some kind of help to possibly 5150 her again. So, these are the challenges. I understand from a cultural perspective, a lot of this has to coincide with education. And the more we talk about this, the more we bring these conversations up, and in multiple different dialects in the Asian American community is important. I think as second generation kids or transgeneration kids like myself get older, are able to bridge that cultural and language barrier for their parents, and that older generation is important to talk about mental illness. And also a lot of what I see on the field is the trauma that comes along with poverty, about what happens in the immigration process and the immigrant experience. A lot of that comes into play when we see the immigrants come into this country, and then also what they deal through as they're trying to survive. And obviously everyone's worried about food, shelter, and on finances, but a lot of times there's a lot of trauma that comes with that experience, and there's a lot of after effects. Nina and I work pretty close. My guys on the mental evaluation team and Nina work hand in hand, and a lot of the cases that we deal with from the immigrant population is that immigrant experience, that trauma, what brings along with it, and those are some of the struggles that we deal with from the day to day.
I'm so glad you actually brought that up, because we don't know where these folks are coming, what they're experiencing, and right now they're just trying to find a way to survive. And I think that's why it's so important that we have, folks like you, Sergeant Hung, and like Emily and Nina. Like, what you guys do is so important, integral to supporting this community so they can overcome that trauma. But it's not going to solve all their problems, but there's a way to overcome that trauma so they can live that life where they don't have to always wrestle with anxiety and depression. But you hit the nail on the head when it comes to trying to find providers that speak multiple languages. And I do think it's a lot better now than it was, say, like 10, 15 years ago. That's always just going to be the challenge. And I actually wanted to ask, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. Let's get it back on the road. Since Sergeant Hung, since you are a medical responder, I don't know if anyone else is a first responder, excuse me. Do you have any kind of advice or any guidance that you can provide the audience with, how can you be more, like, how can we be more mindful and empathetic to those experiencing mental illness, or what can we do so we don't have to put them in a position where it's going to freak them out anymore?
Well, it is challenging from a first responder perspective. I think the most important thing, I think, people on this panel, if you have family members or people who are mentally ill, and part of it is also having that dialogue, providing the information needed to officers if you need officers to respond to these type of calls. And I think the public needs to really understand that, when officers respond to someone who's under a crisis situation, whether it's mental health, whether it's substance abuse, these are very volatile, emotional, sometimes explosive situations that we deal with. And we're very lucky in the sense from the Monterey Park Police Department, where our officers are very well trained in mental health, de-escalation, and slowing things down. Officers innately want to arrive, bring calm to the chaos, to take control of the situations. That's how we're trained. But not all police officers across this country is trained with the same type of training that's provided. And, Monterey Park is very unique that our officers have a long history of understanding the cultural competency, in dealing with our demographic and population. So, for example, Monterey Park Police Department officers are very well aware that there's always a language barrier. That's something culturally ingrained in our officers to understand. A lot of times there's a language barrier that we have to deal with, number one. Number two, there's a cultural barrier, right? And then on top of that, our officers are able to address and deal with those types of situations. Now, with that being said, family members need to provide as much information to first responders when we respond to these type of calls, what medication they're on, what mental illness, what diagnosis, whether or not there's weapons, whether or not they have a history of violence, and really have the honest conversation. A lot of the times, family members in the Asian American communities, they don't reach out or seek resources until there is a crisis. So, for example, we had a case just yesterday that we had a 12-year-old little girl who was essentially having a mental health crisis on the verge of, she was having almost a breakdown, anxiety, and she was found in the streets with a weapon, with a knife. And, she is an immigrant. She's going through an immigrant experience, been stuck at home due to COVID. She's reached out to mom a couple of times, almost trying to tell mom, like, hey, I think I'm sick. There's something wrong with me. Mom's response was eat more noodles and, focus on your homework. They live in a very confined, they lack the resources. They were recently evicted, which is probably illegal during COVID. And their luggage were thrown out onto the streets by this Chinese landlord. So there's a lot of trauma, and that's why she had the knife on her. There's insecurity, there's fear, lack of being able to converse with her friends and her peers, and not knowing where to turn, and her mom not having the resources or the skills or even the cultural understanding to sit down and have that conversation to help the daughter. Make a long story short, after our officers spent 45 minutes with her, just talking to her and letting her open up and getting the things off her chest and reassuring her that what she's experiencing, feeling, and doing, she didn't do anything wrong, and that we understand. It's almost like she was coming out of this dream. She became more normal, more talkative, more coherent, and eventually we ended up having to hospitalize her still. But what I'm saying is, she doesn't know who to turn to. Mom has no idea who to turn to for resources. Mom had very little concept of what depression is. Mom herself probably suffered trauma and depression, leaving China, being a former victim of domestic violence, being evicted, not knowing her rights. So a lot of these issues that we're talking about, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of droning on and on. They're very multi-layered, very complex, and as much as we are just starting to scratch the surface of how to deal with these things. It's going to require multidisciplinary resources and expertise in order to help address some of these issues. Law enforcement will always be almost like the first responder, the trauma folks to stabilize. But we definitely need the community's help, people like, Emily and people like Nina, to bring the support services and to carry the baton forward, to bring the wraparound services to stabilize these type of situations and help us with the education piece of this.
In response to that, and either Nina or Emily, you both of you can chime in on how that works. So here we have someone like this little 12-year-old girl. What is the first thing that you would recommend in regards to her care, but especially talking to her parents? And I think that's it's a really hot issue right now, because young people's mental health has suffered greatly because of COVID. So if we have any advice or any guidance on how we can help, and especially the folks here that you have young people, you have your own children that are experiencing this, what can you tell them what can you provide in regards to advice and how to get them help so this doesn't happen again,
De-escalation when clients are in crisis, or when anybody is in crisis, de-escalation is really the first thing that we do. Once they're more stabilized, is then to slowly educate them. Okay, you now need service, and this is what service looks like, how long it might take, what is needed from you or your family, your support members. And then we go through the process step by step with them, introducing little by little, item by item with them, one at a time when they're ready, through professional help. So,
do you find that it's difficult for them to kind of grasp what it is that you're talking about? Like, because obviously, I'm assuming this young lady's parents were just as traumatized as she was. So it's just kind of like, are they all, every case is different, but it takes time for them to kind of process everything, correct?
Yeah, so it really takes time. So that's why it's like one step at a time. But from my experience, is that when clients are in crisis, when it gets to that point and other entities are involved, such as law enforcement are involved or the hospitals are involved, it seems like they are more receptive. They're more willing in the beginning to listen and to understand what's going on. But you can't lose them. It's so important for professionals to not lose them along the way, because sometimes they feel like, oh, I'm better, and they're just done and they're out, and then it reoccurs. But it takes time. So they're more receptive, definitely, when they're in crisis mode. So educating the community that are not in crisis yet, to give them information prior to getting there, is so crucial. But it's also so much more difficult because they're not in crisis, so they're not as receptive. So therefore, it's just a cycle, and it's that whole continuing piece of community, educating the community, and wraparound service, letting them know we're all here to help, and passing out all these resources out there, letting them know where to go when they see signs of service that's needed.
Yeah. And Emily, from your perspective, as someone, you actually reached that crisis mode, and how you reacted, it's incredible what must have been going through your mind at that time. And do you have any guidance for folks that maybe they're almost at that point where it's just like, I need help. Where do I go? And do I have the courage to find help?
Mm-hmm. One saying that they say in the mental health community is, with help, there's hope. And helplessness is not hopelessness, which I learned from Recovery Internationally support group that I go to. NAMI also says that there's no health without mental health. So anyway, so one thing, when you were asking the question to Bob about how can we help individuals, how can we alleviate the stigma? And part of it is using person first language or people first language. I know that in the news, oftentimes people who have a diagnosis of mental illness are called the mentally ill. And so it's used as a noun, and And I think it takes away, and it follows the disability rights movement of using people first language, that a person is not defined by their disability, but they are a person with a disability or a person with mental illness. And so, you know, when I was in high school, I did take psychology. And so the only examples of mental illness that they show you is the like absolute like worst, you know, condition. Because like autism, there's a spectrum of people who are, you know, when they're experiencing psychosis or some kind of episode that, you know, they're in like, they really, you know, they really need help. And then there's, you know, normal people who, well, not, you know, regular people who are able to, you know, kind of still function, but, you know, with mental health being stigmatized for so long, it's kind of like when you don't address your own emotions, they become the skeletons in your closet that you're so fearful of addressing. But the more you don't address them, the harder it gets to address them later on. And that's why mental health is so important. Learning your emotional coping skills, you know, because with our own mental health, it's just like exercising. We need mental hygiene just as like physical hygiene or exercise. You know, we need mental exercises. And so like so we need to develop these coping skills. And so as a person who's been in the mental health field for a while, as a peer, I always advocate for support groups, you know, so that peers especially know that they're not alone in their struggles. And even though sometimes mental health, getting appointments with clinicians can be very difficult, like as it was in my own experience, because I was like, you know, with my insurance at the time, I'm not poor enough to receive services. But I'm not rich enough to pay like regular price. And so there are places that have sliding scale, but then it's like you just have to keep on calling and calling and calling. And yes, while having an episode, like while still distressed, I was making all these phone calls to try to help me help myself. And it was very discouraging at the time, because they almost, it sounded like everyone was saying, sorry, we can't help you. Here's another number, here's another number, here's another number. And like, oh my God, when am I going to get the help I need? And so I think that, you know, as they say in Recovery International, try, fail, try, fail, try, fail, and succeed. And, you know, it's trying to find the best mental health care for you depends on you. You as a peer, it's if you are diagnosed with a mental illness, it's so important for you to take the lead in your own recovery and figure out what works best for you, because, you know, not everyone's going to take even the same medications, psychiatric medications. You know, it depends on your diagnosis. There are therapists, there's psychiatrists, there's peer support specialists. If I was working in the mental health field, I would probably be serving as a peer support specialist, so that peers know that you're not alone in your struggles, and we would share our stories with you so that you know you're not alone. And so, yeah, support groups have been so helpful for me. The one that I keep on referring to is called Recovery International. This is the book that we read in our support groups, or we are all virtual now. This is called Mental Health Through Will Training. The book is by Dr. Abraham Lowe, and it refers to cognitive behavioral training that we use to help us learn coping skills, like when we're in distress, to help us de-stress. There's a file that, if I could show you, I'll just share the link in the chat box. So some of the coping skills from their sample list of tools is nervous symptoms and sensations are distressing, but are not dangerous. Another, like, because when, like, for instance, I think anyone could use this list, whether you're diagnosed with a mental illness or not. Like, per se, like, if you misplace something so important, your wallet, your car keys, your driver's license, like anything, and if you're in that moment where you're like, oh my God, where did it go? It's so, and even a car accident, and but you're still safe, because I had to use that, skill, that coping skill, to remember, like, okay, nervous symptoms are distressing but are not dangerous. I'm in a car accident, but I'm still safe. I am safe. And the other tool they say is let's see, like trivia, like they talk about how there's a like car accidents are very common, so you're not alone. Or even if you misplace things, many people misplace things, so you're not alone. So there's nothing to be ashamed of, because everyone makes these mistakes, and so I just have to remind myself of these things. Okay, I'm safe. I replace the insecure thought with a secure thought. And if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, decide, plan, and act. Take things in smaller steps so they don't overwhelm you. When you're doing things that are so uncomfortable, like do the things you fear and hate to do. The more you do them, the easier it gets. And yes, it's tough, but the more you do it won't be as hard. So, and the other two, last two that I'll share is have the courage to make a mistake. Growing up in an Asian culture where we had to get everything perfectly, like, oh my gosh, like this was hard to do in my life. So, but it's like just remembering, everybody makes mistakes. And so it's okay to be human. And the last one I'll share is endorse yourself for the effort, not just for the performance. Because when I think that this mental health journey is a journey of learning to like yourself, to love yourself, to enjoy your own company. Because if you are hating yourself, then it's going to be hard to even interact with other people. And so endorse yourself for every effort, not just for the performance. Because when you make mistakes, you're still learning. There's still stepping stones for you to grow into a better person. And when you know better, you do better. And so and endorsing yourself is like keep continuing to self-validate and be the parent, trying to be the parent that you needed when you were growing up. So,
and
yeah.
You're leading perfectly into my last question. This is for all the panelists on, we all know the term self-care. It's become a buzzword in the last 2 years, where it's just like, oh, I'm gonna take a bubble bath, or I'm gonna do some painting. But since the three of you have very different perspectives, what do you do for self-care, and what can you provide us with some tips that go beyond BuzzFeed's top 10, you know. Anyone chime in?
I'll start off. I think self-care is very challenging, especially during COVID. I think traditionally a lot of people find external outlets to keep themselves distracted and or to keep themselves busy. And in reality, not deal with their stress or they use external factors to compensate. But I think for myself and my wife and the kids and what I see at work, one of the ways we are able to kind of refocus and focus on self-care is putting yourself in a proper mindset, always reevaluating mentally what you have, cherish the things that are important to you, and to refocus on why we do what we do and what we focus on. I'm smiling right now because my 2.5-year-old just opened the door and walked in and is looking for me. But I think it's very challenging time right now. Even just a little bit of quiet time in the backyard, having honest conversations and really connecting with your loved ones, with your friends, in deep conversation and reevaluating what is important. That's how I've been getting by. Gone on the vacations and staying in hotels or going out to eat and those things. But I just realized during the COVID pandemic, in some ways, those were just bandages to a deeper conversation and understanding. So, my suggestion to you is have those deep conversations, have those deep connections. And, if you're struggling, just understand you're not alone. There are people, Chinatown Service Center is a godsend from, especially in our community, we've been working closely with, and I can't plug them enough. But even out there's other resources, and just understand you can always call the Monterey Park Police Department, ask for an officer, even if it's just for us to come out to sit and just say, hey, you're really having a really bad day. You think you need some help, mental health crisis. And even our officers will come out and listen and just have a long conversation with you. Even if it's that, there's always someone there.
Thank you, Surgeon Hong. You really nailed the point in self-reflection and just slow down and to know what makes you happy and what makes you be able to just reflect back on yourself and the experience that you've been through. I think part of mental illness or mental health, I'd like to correlate it with physical health sometimes. Physical health, you're able to see symptoms like pain. You're able to tell pain like, oh, I'm not feeling well. Am I having a cold? Or I have a lump here. Like, should I get a check in with a doctor? So there are like these physical symptoms that you can tell. But with mental health, what do you use? What do you use to gauge? Like, how do you know when to seek help? And I think that's where we find it hard to define and how the community is having a difficult time. What is mental illness? And culturally, in the Chinese culture, as you grow up, you probably just spoke about what's happy and what's sad. But how about all the other feelings? Like, are you taught what ecstatic is, what nervousness is, fearful, joyful, what's dislike, and what's like, there's so many different kind of emotions that usually, especially I feel like in the Chinese community, you're not really shown these different kind of emotions. So you don't know how to tell what it is, like and these could be the signs and symptoms that you should use to gauge yourself with your mental health. So yeah, those are just something that being able to slow down and reflect on your emotions, on yourself, what had caused you to behave in a certain way. I love to use the symptom or like the analysis of what you're thinking and what you feel and your action should all align. But it does not always happen. What you think, what you feel, and what you act, especially in Chinese culture. You might feel like, I want to say no to a certain request, but I actually ended up saying yes because I need to abide, because I have to respect a certain individual because they asked me to do something, but you didn't feel that way. So why did you say yes? So it's like, it's important to kind of reflect and make sure you align all three: mind, heart, and action. And back to the question about self-help or self-care. Due to the pandemic and the lack of ability to go out physically, I actually started journaling, and of course, it's somewhat of a cliche. Everybody's like, "Oh, journaling help," and me being myself a professional, I actually never really attempted until the pandemic started. And oh my God, it's just really changed. And I have to say, I even probably influenced my husband to started doing journaling, and I think it has really helped. So journaling is really an area that you can find yourself a quiet place and just start jotting away, and it'll eventually you'll start to have some self-realization, and I think that really helped with mental health. So that's my take.
So for me, I think that when we get diagnosed with a mental illness, or if we know that we're emotionally struggling, it's sometimes to do things on your own can sometimes be, it can still be distressful. And so it's also important to look for help, support. But sometimes, finding the right friends or right people to talk to can be a struggle as well. Because if you talk to your family and, they might not always be the most supportive person to sympathize. When I talked to my mom, told her about my struggle about trying to find mental health services, she's like, "Why do you need to talk to them? Like, you can just talk to me. I'm free." There's just certain things where family members and super close friends can be triggers, because if they've been part of some of the issues that you've been dealing with for most of your life, and if they trigger you, they might not be the best person to talk to. So it is important to try to seek support groups, professional help if you feel the need to. And supportive friends who can understand you. I know it's a struggle if people are not, understanding of your story, or when you open up your heart to them, or even making new friends, it's really difficult to share and become so vulnerable with others. But even though it's so uncomfortable, it can also help your friendship to grow. And then, they can become another person who can check up on you from time to time. And when I talked to, there was this lady named Dr. Eliza No from Cal State Fullerton, and her sister had died by suicide. She had shared with me in our conversations that one thing in her research was that when she was talking to other individuals who had attempted suicide, was that what she found in common with all of them was that they would seek out support from other people. And that was crucial to their recovery, to finding, because we are social animals, and we live with people. We just can't do things alone. We can never do things alone. As much as we would like to, everybody has their own, expertise, and and even if you do want to start sharing with your family members who may not be so prone to these kinds of conversations, you can do it little by little. And if they are not responsive, you just try to gauge them, and and so that you can also alleviate the stigma of mental health in their own mind. So baby steps, sometimes that's what it takes. And but don't make as many friends as you can, because if one person is not available, then you can find other people to talk to. There's also other warm lines that are available. There's the California Peer Support Warm Line that I can share with Deborah, so that when she sends a follow-up email, she can send it to you. But yeah, reach out. Don't do everything by yourself.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, panelists, for taking the time to talk to all of us about what it is that we can do in regards to not only taking care of our own mental health, but advocating for our loved ones and our family, especially in the Asian community. We're at the 12 o'clock hour, so I'm going to go ahead and open up for a few minutes of questions if anybody has any for our panelists. So I'm going to go ahead. If you'd like to, you should be able to unmute yourself. And just ask away if you do.
I don't have Ryan here. I'm a peer support specialist. I just wanted to comment on one of the questions that was asked, like how to help people who have mental health challenges. I feel like just listen, like don't dismiss or jump to solutions immediately. You can ask questions to show them you care. And after you build a rapport with that person, you can offer services. So that's how I would approach somebody, like in my personal circle, immediate circle, like that's how I would approach helping them.
Right. Right.
Thank you, Ryan, for sharing. Ryan is actually one of our my colleagues with NAMI. Both Linda and Ryan Rebueno are our support. They are my fellow peer facilitators for NAMI San Gabriel Valley. We offer weekly support groups on Wednesday nights from 6 to 7:30. And we also offer classes called peer-to-peer. And I was about to try to figure out how to send a link to the chat box so that I could give you guys access to the flyers.
If you can't send the flyer, just go ahead and email it to me and I can email it out to those who registered for today.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
Before we wrap up.
Well, I think it's really awesome that those of you who are here, we can't see your faces, but you guys are also alleviating the stigma with mental illness, mental health, just by being here to educate yourselves. And I give you guys props for learning, because if you are impacted by mental health, the more you know, the more you're able to help others. And so that's why, like in my video, if you look up Each Mind Matters, each one of you are so important to making a difference in the communities that you live in, wherever you are. And so back in the day, when I first started with mental health, like everybody knows what the color like pink ribbon is for, but nobody knows what the green ribbon stands for. So the green ribbon stands for mental health awareness. And since this is Mental Health Awareness Month, this is a gray ribbon to wear. I would pass out a ribbon to each one of you if this event was in person.
Maybe
But-
next year we can do that. Yeah, it's also great that it's also API month. So
Mhm.
that's why I think bridging these conversations is, and obviously mental health month is not just 1 month. It is
Right.
a year round. But the
Yeah.
fact it happens to coincide API month is just a really important conversation to have. And I'm just so glad everybody took the time to attend. Because we often, especially minority communities in general, often are overlooked or overlooked in the sense of mental health care. Minority communities also have less access to mental health care, and it's just something that's really, really, really important, because if we don't take care of ourselves, not only just physically but emotionally, how can we be productive members of society? How can we be the leaders and the amazing people that we are if we don't love, or we don't know how to help manage our emotions and love ourselves and to feel that we are worth that fight for. So before I get all preachy, does anybody else have any other questions before I turn it over to Monica, who will give a presentation on Chinatown Service Center's services? If not, anyone else? No? Give or take? Okay, well, again, I want to thank our panelists. If you got to get going, no problem. I totally understand. But again, thank you everyone for your time. You need to take a quick, like a 5-minute break just to stretch your legs. Let's go ahead and do that now so we can give Monica some time to set up for her presentation. So thank you again. And also I will email you all the information that's provided. Emily will email it to you from NAMI. If Nina, if you have anything you want to share, just send it to me and I can send all of you an email that information after the presentation. So thank you again, and we'll be back about 5 minutes.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Deborah, for having us.
Of course.
Cool. So awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for staying on after that awesome panel. And thanks for your attention throughout this whole mental health virtual fair. This was a 2-day series, so if you've joined us last week and continued on to this week, we really appreciate it. So my name is Monica Cua. I work here at Chinatown Service Center as the community outreach worker for the Behavioral Health Division. But I think one thing that I wanted to piggyback on was Sergeant Hung said that while he's a first responder, mental health is a continuum of care. And so the community organizations and government organizations that are available to you are will provide the backbone to your mental wellness and your journey to mental wellness. So I'm here to present one of the organizations, being Chinatown Service Center, as your resource to you. And so while I work for the Behavioral Health Division, Chinatown Service Center offers a range of care. And so I just want to show you the holistic care that you can receive from from Chinatown Service Center. So again, my name is Monica Cua. I'm the community outreach worker. I have a background in political science, and I've worked for nonprofits and for at LA City Hall doing sort of community work, advocacy work, and things of that sort. And my email is there in case you ever want to reach out after the presentation. So Chinatown Service Center. Chinatown Service Center is one of the largest community-based Chinese American health and human service organization in Southern California. We're deeply rooted in Los Angeles, Chinatown, starting in 1971. We have 50 years of service, and we assist greater than 100,000 individuals annually. And then we also expanded from Chinatown. We expanded to the San Gabriel Valley. So now we have operations in Alhambra, Monterey Park, San Gabriel, Temple City, things like that. So as I mentioned, I work for the Behavioral Health Center, which falls under being a federally qualified health center. But we have 4 umbrellas of care, one being social services, The second one being us being a federally qualified health center. And then the next one is having a youth center. And then the last one is economic development. So you can see that while our office provides behavioral health services, we have a range of care that provides holistic care for the community. So if you reach out to us for behavioral health services, you can also find other services that might be available to you. And our mission statement being to provide outstanding services and advocacy that promote better quality of life and equal opportunity for immigrants and other communities. So the way Chinatown Service Center was started was we are rooted in providing social services to the community. So it started out with finding the need to provide social services to immigrants and immigrant populations. And so we started out with social services, and now that expanded to providing senior services and providing basically mainly all of the services that senior citizens might need. So wellness benefits and referral programs, so that to make sure that whatever they need, we can either provide or point them in the right direction. And beyond that, we are a federally qualified health center, meaning that we have medical, dental, optometry, and behavioral health services from Chinatown and in the San Gabriel Valley. And then we also have a youth center that provides after-school tutoring and leadership development and college prep courses. And we provide services for both young children, and we have opportunities for high school students as well. And we have an economic development department where they provide financial services, either individual financing or small business financing. And I think something that's important to note is that we have services that are multilingual. So services are available in Spanish, Vietnamese, Cantonese, Mandarin, Huishan, and Chojo. So the array of dialects in Chinese and also Spanish and Vietnamese. So here's the social services program. You can see it's a very robust social services program. And the contact information is on the screen there. And so the large part of it is providing integrated case management to seniors and empower them the ability to live and thrive independently. So at social services, a case manager will be able to hear and assess your needs and collaborate with you to find resources for whatever you might need: transportation, housing, food, resources, and make appropriate referrals. There's also auxiliary services such as naturalization and citizenship and affordable housing. And so if you were ever interested in that, you can always just reach out to Chinatown Service Center and learn more. The next one being a federally qualified health center. This is also robust. I would say all four of the departments are very robust. So medical, dental, behavioral health, and optometry. We have medical clinics in LA, Alhambra, and San Gabriel, and dental clinics across San Gabriel Valley as well. And then the contact information is there. So they take similar insurances that behavioral health does. And the dental also takes any company's insurance. So our youth center, to expand upon that, a large part of it is tutoring services, and with the tutoring services is college prep courses. So the youth center prepares children for, teenagers for college by meeting to discuss the types of colleges that are available to them and also how to fund college. So I think that's important because a lot of times we think that we're not able to take advantage of certain opportunities because of funding. And so this is a great gateway to learn about local and national funding opportunities. Beyond that, there's the LA Chinatown Youth Council. It's a community service group that identifies and solves problems concerning the Chinatown community by building pride and ownership among every individual. So it's a leadership training and a community service oriented group consisting of high school students. And if you ever wanted to learn more, the contact information is there to sort of get more details on ways you can join. And then there's economic development. And then so, like I said, what consists within economic development is personal and small business. So their team aims to empower clients with knowledge and skills in personal finance and to help them successfully create pathways to financial well-being. So they provide financial management classes, financial coaching, and sort of they'll guide you in what if you need consulting on like how to open small businesses, the loans that you need to open, whatever tax codes you need to learn, things like that. And then for small businesses, it's the same. So they provide free and essential small business development to businesses in Chinatown, in the SGV, and beyond that. And so you can see the training and workshops that they have. They have entrepreneur training programs, access to capital, basically everything you need to start building your small business and whatever you need to thrive in your small business. And they have one-on-one consultation. It's either the volunteers on their staff or their actual staff will train with you for any like business marketing or strategic planning. Okay, so for the behavioral health division, I'll go into more detail about the behavioral health services that are available to you and our community. And so here at Chinatown Service Center's behavioral health division, we've actually expanded to become a certified community behavioral health center. And so what that means is that we've received funding to basically become a more equipped behavioral health services for the community. It's a model of care that provides a comprehensive range of mental health services to vulnerable populations. And so it's not just counseling, we're also now equipped to provide case management, group therapy, and sort of a more holistic range of care for you or the community. And so we've now expanded to become a 24/7 crisis mental health service. So under that includes the ability to call if you have an emergency, but of course, call emergency services first. We have individual and group counseling, outpatient mental health and substance use services, and immediate screening and assessment. Like I said, we practice around community-based mental health care. So that means we're providing support groups, workshops, constant education for the community on behavioral health concerns and mental wellness as a whole. We also do partnerships with local agencies and organizations for a bi-directional referral process. So I think like Emily said, mental wellness is not just a personal struggle, we need to ask for help from everyone. So that includes when you're seeking care, it's important for us to unite with the community and provide all aspects of care that you might need. We've also expanded our internal services. So we have a peer support specialist and case management for direct support past your support from your therapist or clinician. And we have directed care for members of armed forces and veterans. And so just to go into detail about our behavioral health services and planning. So while we have individual counseling, which is a big portion of our work, we have couples counseling, family counseling, and in-home counseling. We also have a psychiatrist on staff and a nurse practitioner on staff that will help with medicated assisted treatment and psychiatric services. And beyond that, beyond the hour session or whatever you're receiving, we have peer support specialist services. And then for supportive programming, we are contracted by Department of Children and Family Services and Department of Mental Health to provide the supportive programming for the community. So we have a whole array of things such as domestic violence survivor group, men and women's domestic violence perpetrator group, child abuse prevention, intervention and treatment program, family preservation, outpatient care services, parenting classes, the list goes on. And we have a great staff that will help with that. We have licensed social workers on staff and associate social workers and marriage and family therapists on staff to help you and provide the best service of care. And then, like Nina said, I think maybe a barrier to having access to care is insurance or payment. And so listed is the insurance that we take, but here at Chinatown Service Center, we believe in providing care and working to make sure you receive that care despite your circumstances. So we also do sliding scale fee. And we also, our admin team works really hard to try to accommodate in any way possible. So even if you're not a citizen or things like that, we'll still work our best to try and provide that care for you. And then so just to alert you of some upcoming events, like I said, for our supportive programming, we put on a lot of group therapy sessions. And so we're actually starting new group therapy sessions open to the public soon. So if you're maybe, if you aren't ready for one-on-one counseling, or maybe there's barriers such as like payment and things like that, you can attend some of our group therapy sessions to sort of find a community first and to have a foundation of care. And so we're going to have group therapy sessions that include introduction to cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which is kind of just reworking the thought process behind sort of our mental illnesses. Emotional injury matters, which is very similar, and non-medicated relaxation techniques. The links are listed right there, but we'll also provide that for you afterwards. I think one thing that we're trying to work on is providing services in different languages, because I think there is a big gap in providing only English services. So we're actually hosting an upcoming Zoom webinar with one of our clinicians on staff. And it's about preparing children to return back to school and sort of the fears, apprehensions that go along with that. And so this webinar is actually going to be in Chinese and presented in Chinese. And so we're kind of trying to see if there is a gap in the community that needs a webinar or help solely in a different language, we would like to provide that and see if we can fill that gap. So the clinicians on staff will be sharing how parents can adjust for themselves, and then we'll also guide them through that change and the fears and the worries. So it's on May 23rd, and you can scan the QR link, or I can circulate this flyer for you afterwards. And then lastly, just to keep up with not just the behavioral health department's services, but to see all of CSC services, you can sign up for the newsletter. There's a monthly newsletter where you'll see events from the economic development department, behavioral health, updates with COVID-19, like vaccination sites or testing, things like that. And it's on our website if you go under services or more and then newsletter, if you want to sign up for that. And yeah, that's our contact information and a rundown of our services. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask. I'm going to look in the chat. Yes, services are available to anyone who needs help. And also, you don't have to be a patient of Chinatown Service Center's medical center to receive behavioral health help, for example. So it's for the greater community, and we just are here to help. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask, or if you want to reach out later on, if you have more questions, you can totally do that as well. Here at Chinatown Service Center, we do have a clinician on staff that is staffed 24/7. through a call line, and I can provide that as well later on.
I just wanted to reiterate about the 24/7. It's more for services. It's not direct chatting that's available. It's not like a hotline, like a mental health hotline. We currently are working on that. But the 24-hour service are for clients or patients that are currently with us and they need services immediately. Then we have an on-call person to connect you with to discuss the situation that you're experiencing. I hope that helps.
All right. So if anyone has any questions about Chinatown Service Center or anything that we've had for the mental health virtual fair, you can reach out to either myself or to Deborah. She will be sending out a post-workshop email with all the links and all of the good stuff that we've talked about today. But I think that's it. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. This was awesome. And I think it was like a very, very serendipitous that AAPI History Month coincides with Mental Health Awareness Month. And this was a great opportunity for Chinatown Service Center and Monterey Park to work together and sort of put these services out into the open for you guys. So I want to thank everyone for participating and for taking the time for us.
Yes. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I did want to let you know that the Monterey Park Bruggemeyer Library is open by appointment. Yes, we are open, but it's by appointment only. So if you have any questions or you want to stop by the library, we do have a really great selection of books on mental health. We actually received a very large grant last year to purchase materials, and with COVID, they're still pretty brand new. So if you like brand new books, come on down. To make an appointment, you just visit our website at montereypark.ca.gov/library. And to answer Joy's question, or I'm sorry, Ryan's question, unfortunately, we're not allowing any browsing right now, but if you, we're more than welcome to put some items on hold for you by searching our catalog, or you can just make an appointment for a staff member. It's about 30 minutes and we can help you find what you're looking for. We do offer contactless checkout services if you're not quite comfortable yet coming to the library, but we are available if you would like to stop by. So thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and I wish you all the best in your mental health journeys, and know that you're not alone. Have a great one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Deborah. Good job.
Bye. Thank you.